Around the Ozarks is now on your FM radio. Listen to Around the Ozarks mornings with Grace Gooley as I spotlight local people, stories, and podcasts, all while playing the country legends of the 90s and the hit makers of the 2000s. It's on the Ozarks' best country, 105.1 The Bull.
You're listening to The Real Deal Conversations, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you by sharing real stories and meaningful conversations that bring real life to the surface. I'm your host, Megan Deal. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Moss Place Family Restaurant, Ozark Veterinary Clinic, and Little Green Dumpster. Today, we are joined by Dr. Claire Plumbly, a clinical psychologist from the United Kingdom and author of Burnout and the Trauma of Burnout. Dr. Plumbly brings both clinical expertise and deep compassion to a topic so many of us have lived, but haven't always had the language for. So this conversation, we're going to unpack the core ideas from the trauma of burnout, which hopefully it's going to help you recognize the signs of burnout before you hit the wall, understand what's actually happening in your nervous system, release the shame that is so often attached to the exhaustion itself, and walk away with practical tools to begin finding steadiness again. So if you're running on empty, if you felt numb, reactive, detached, or like you should be able to carry more than you can, this episode is going to give words to what you're experiencing, and hopefully more than that, give you a way forward to step into tomorrow with confidence. Dr. Plumbly, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for the gorgeous introduction.
Yes. So let's just kind of dive in and give people what is burnout. Because I think, in your book, I really related to the fact that burnout can be masked as so many other things. And so people are looking for help in things that aren't going to help because it's actually burnout. So what is burnout?
Yeah, and I think people hear that word and intuitively sense part of it, which is that it's exhaustion. But it is more than that. And so, I just want to highlight it's not an official psychiatric diagnosis, but it is in the World Health Organization classed as a syndrome, which means there's 3 clusters of things that co-occur, which, just to run through, include exhaustion, but it's physical and emotional exhaustion, which I always think sounds a bit odd. Like, how can you get emotionally exhausted? But essentially it means you're not getting access to the full beautiful repertoire of emotions, including the happy ones and the content ones. You're kind of just stuck with the negative ones and oscillating between overwhelmed and irritable, or kind of just drained and empty and feeling hollow and overwhelmed and sad, cynical. So that's the first part of the syndrome. The second part is that we tend to become quite detached. So we're disengaged from the things that used to light us up, the jobs and the projects that used to kind of make us feel like we were accomplishing things. That can be really hard to connect with. And unfortunately, that part of the syndrome makes it hard for us to notice in ourselves that we are burnt out because we are detached from ourselves as well. So that's something, just a red flag. And the third one is that there is reduced personal accomplishment, a sense of being effective. So essentially, all those balls you're juggling, we start to drop some. So what that might look like early on is, you forget to attend a meeting, or you don't prep so well for turning up to the meeting. But that can get quite heavy and dysfunctional after a while, where you're really kind of cutting corners or messing up. And that can be quite shame-filled, so people might hide that a little bit. So all of those 3 things, the definition says, occurs in the context of unmanaged chronic occupational stress. So that's a key part of it. And so where it can look like other things like depression and anxiety, what you're looking at is the context. What's going on? What are the unmanaged stresses here? And I like to unpick it with people. And sometimes it is more than just paid work, which is our understanding of occupational quite often, because, you're a busy mum. You come home from work and your second shift starts. It's probably already turning in your head what you're going to have for dinner tonight and who's going to pick up, your kids. So we're carrying quite often multiple different sources of stresses, and quite often there is a lot of stuff that is hard to manage. So yeah, it's all of that can make a massive impact on our well-being.
Like you had mentioned, just in that explanation, the light goes out, things just aren't the same. And I think when you're in that phase of you're not recognizing what it is, burnout, there is that shame. There's that confusion. There's that is there something wrong with me? Am I losing my identity? I love to take care of people. I'm a fixer. I want to help. But when this last year is like burnout, it's like I don't even have that spark in me. I don't have that ability. And so when you're going through that, it does make you start to feel like, what is wrong with me? And what I love so much about your book is there was so many words put to the experience, which took away that identity confusion, the shame, and the questioning of, is my spark going to come back? Is this a permanent thing? Am I going to be like this forever? Just feeling like I don't even want to take care of people anymore? And so so that kind of leads me into the symptoms of
Yeah.
burnout.
Yeah.
So what are the most obvious symptoms, but what are the symptoms that people really would be shocked by?
Okay. I always think it's helpful to approach this by thinking about the four areas that a psychologist looks at, which
Mhm,
is your body. So what's
mhm,
going on in your body? Because that gives a lot of signs and symptoms. So obviously feeling fatigued and heavy. You also get often signs of that, when you've had prolonged stress, of wear and tear in your body. So you'll be catching every cold going, taking
mhm,
longer to recover. Um, you might get aches and pains in the large skeletal muscle groups, like along your back and neck.
mhm,
I tend to get lots of cold sores. Like, what are your personal signs in your body?
mhm,
If you've got pre-existing IBS or something like
mhm,
that, eczema, you'll often see those things flaring up. So what are your stress red flags? Are they kind of happening a lot more?
mhm,
So that's the body. And then we've got your cognitions, your thoughts. The quality of your thoughts quite often become, we go, when we're stressed, everything's about over engagement. So we're trying to find the problems. When we're in burnout, it tends to tip into more of a hopeless,
mhm,
despairing, or not caring, disconnected place.
mhm,
And there's that bit in between as you're slipping into burnout where it might oscillate between those two, but you're not really getting any of the nice thoughts. It's kind of over engaged or disengaged,
mhm,
but not in a good way.
mhm,
um Escapism thoughts, like I just wish I
mhm,
could break a leg, or something where nobody would ask anything of me for a little bit. Or sometimes suicidal thoughts as well, which makes sense. Your brain's trying to problem solve its way out of it, and that might present itself as an option. Cognitively as well, brain fog. So getting confused, like getting like yeah, feeling like muddly or not clear, not remembering things, struggling to concentrate. So
mhm,
it's not just about the quality of thoughts, it's also about the kind of yeah, the essence of what's happening in your brain cognitively. Decision making can become very hard. Like there's a bit of like, I don't care, whatever, someone else decide.
mhm,
Just feeling overwhelmed, like I can't even make a decision because this won't fix the bigger situation here. So people describe just stood in front of the shop shelves trying to work out what to have for dinner and just feeling like, "Oh, I can't even decide, like just
mhm,
beans on toast tonight kind of thing." um Being on autopilot, so
mhm,
feeling like you're just going through the motions, and large chunks of the day sometimes lost to just literally rote going through stuff, which doesn't maybe present itself. Again, it's easy to miss that until you're asked, like, what was that new girl's name? Oh, I don't know, I was just going through the motions. Or like if there's a problem driving to work and you have to go a different route,
mhm,
and suddenly you're completely thrown because you were functioning just about if you could just go through all the really like rote learned things.
mhm,
um yeah, so those are some of the cognitions. Oh, and just one more, sorry. Transition points in the day I always think are tricky for people,
mhm,
because those are the moments where you might have to have a bit more energy online or a bit more decision making. So
mhm,
quite often, that moment when you have to get out of the car to go and get the kids, or you have to stop work to go and get the kids, like those bits, or putting the
mhm.
kids to bed at night, like those. I'm sorry, I don't know how many of your listeners are parents. I should have checked in with you before that, but
Yeah,
those are lots of people are. So hopefully
yeah.
that's like helpful. But just about any other transition points in your day, transitioning between jobs, quite often that's really clunky for people and burnout.
And do you see, like, especially in those transitional moments, people being more irritable than they typically would be?
So yeah, I was going to move on to the third part, which is emotions. Exactly that. So
Mhm.
irritable snapping. So are you doing that more than others? Sometimes others notice it before you,
Mhm.
if they're brave enough to tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's common. The emotions are exactly that. It's just a sign your bandwidth is like tiny,
Mhm.
narrow,
Mhm.
or feeling like highly anxious, or like I said, closed down and like not caring.
Mhm.
Someone deep in burnout might just have got to that point.
Yeah. And so it's a nervous system response is what, I learned in your book. It's a nervous system response. And so what help us separate, can you explain what is happening in the brain? What is the brain doing in this time so that we can all kind of separate the fact that, oh, this is not our identity. Our brain is actually doing something.
Yeah,
This doesn't mean this has to be who we are. It doesn't mean that, because I truly believe there's a lot of shame in it with, oh
yeah,
my gosh, this is who I am now. Well, no,
yeah.
your brain's doing something, but because we're not experts in it, like people who have studied it, like you, we're not aware that it's two separate things, identity and the brain. So, what kind of help us explain what the brain is doing?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And just to say also, it's scary as well to
Yes.
feel like, is this it now? Will I never remember anything again? Will I never
Yes.
function as a, whatever you are, doctor or parent or teacher? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just bad at it now.
Yeah.
So it's temporary, but you do have to be gentle with yourself when you're coming back from burnout because it takes longer than people think. It often does take longer. And I know that is maybe a hard thing to hear, but maybe it's also just realistic and helpful.
Mhm.
So what's going on? The nervous system, if I can just highlight what that is, because it encompasses the brain, but it's a bit more than that. The autonomic nervous system is what we're referring to when we talk about nervous system in relation to this, is the part of the body that's responsible for keeping us safe. So it's always on and scanning for signs of danger around us before we're consciously aware. So
Mhm.
that means something called neuroception. So it's kind of picking up cues from around our environment and also the faces and the people we're with.
Mhm.
And if there's any even like ambiguity or whiff of danger, your autonomic nervous system kind of kicks in to respond to keep us safe. So the brain is sending messages between the gut, the nerve endings of the vagus nerve will go into the gut and the lungs, important kind of organs of the body, as well as the peripheral areas up around the mouth, the nose, the eyes, the neck. Um, and that's how the nervous system looks after us by this messaging service. But it's important to know that 80% of the direction of travel between the brain and the body goes from the body to the brain. So I'm just highlighting that because quite often people have got some tools like journaling or mindfulness, cognitive tools, affirmations. These are not bad tools, they're good, but they're only accessible to us when we are in our green mode of our nervous system, our ventral vagal part of our nervous system, because that's when our brain, our thinking part of the brain is all online. And of course, in that part, the bit you're alluding to in the book is that that is not what's online so much because we're in our threat brain. And so you need to help the body to feel safe enough to access those tools. So they're not the first thing that we do
Mhm.
if someone's in that really frazzled state. Um, just sorry, going back to your question. So what's the brain doing? So in that state of burnout, we've slipped into more of a shutdown place
Mhm.
because we've gone from sympathetic mode, which is the stress. Stress is
Mhm.
coming in, everything gears up to fight or flight, to respond, to fix, to sort out, mend. And that is a good response if it's short-term stressors and we can fix and there is an end point and you get to the end of your to-do list and everything's done. But for most people or people in burnout, what they've been experiencing is ongoing stressors coming in. I liken it to a tennis ball machine firing shots at you. You can manage that if it's one tennis ball machine, but imagine they keep rolling more out and you're practicing your shots. You just can't keep up. And the only place to go then is into like a book, curl up yourself as a ball on the court so you don't get hit and pummeled.
Mhm.
And the part of the nervous system we're in when we're trapped in stress like that and there's no escape is very similar to trauma, which is why the book's called The Trauma of Burnout, because it's that dorsal shutdown, which is a part of the nervous system, we talk about in trauma therapy. And I just thought we needed to be talking about it more in burnout too, because people could understand and empathize with themselves for being so shut down in their thinking process, because it's an immobilized place. Immobilized because that feels like the safest way to get through. If I just don't move here, the predator will pass and I won't be eaten.
Yep. So
what thoughts have you got? Yeah.
Well, so when you mentioned the body, is that why people say gut health? Just a little side note that I'm thinking in my head. Is that why some people say gut health is so important? Is there really a link to that?
Yeah, so there's a great book called Gut, actually, which has a section. I mean, there's lots, actually. That was one of the first books, I think, Julia Enders, who talks about the gut being like the third brain of the body. And so your organs are just so important, because, and the breath as well, because the breath is the fastest way of bringing your autonomic nervous system under your conscious control. But longer term, if you want to think holistically, which is something we do in psychology, even though I'm not an expert nutritionist, we do know if you're not getting in enough nutrition to keep your to keep your gut biome healthy, you will basically be putting a stress on your body. It's another stressor. It's another tennis ball machine. It's just not a visible one necessarily. And unfortunately, of course, what you see in burnout is a vicious cycle where you're running on empty. You're doing all those things. Your decision making hard, brain fog, tired but wired. And so we slip into the unhelpful behaviors, which are some more red flags you can look for, which is where we're eating the kind of quick and easy convenience food that might not have all the nutrition, and maybe smoking more, maybe drinking more, because it helps us to shut off at night, shut the chattering brain off. Like, I'll just have another beer. And so all of that then, of course, plays into becoming less balanced in our body, and puts a stress on our autonomic nervous system, which is another form of threat.
That's so fascinating to me, because I've always thought it was the opposite, brain to body. And when you're explaining body to brain, it now makes sense why people say gut health is so important. However, I will say I still think a lot of doctors don't think it is I still don't think they see it that way. And so it gets played down a lot. But as you explain this, I'm starting to go, no, I really think there was something to gut health and being that and going up. So that's very fascinating to me. Can you explain, so the 5 stages of burnout, can you kind of give us a summary of each one so that people can kind of go track where they may be?
Yeah. So honeymoon stage is when things feel natural and easy to say yes to. And if we're passionate about a piece of work and it's very aligned with our values, we might struggle to pace ourselves, or leave gaps between tasks. So yeah, that's the first stage. Onset of stress is when a ball machine is rolled out, tennis ball machine, something starts to come up. And so you start to notice some of those stress red flags that I outlined, tension may be starting to increase, some kind of problem solving thoughts and becoming kind of fixated on problems. It's really hard to prioritize self-care. Maybe that gets a bit harder. And then third stage is that chronic stress starts to be seen. So basically all those stress niggles that were whispering to you, they're just like dialed up, like a dial on a volume. Maybe your sleep's starting to really go, and it's frustrating because you want to switch off at night and go to sleep, but your brain has a different idea. And so the appetite, can either appetite can go one of two ways for people. Either we kind of like just stress eat, or we lose our appetite. But so whichever one for you, notice that. And the other things that I said, like your blood pressure, if you're prone to high blood pressure or IBS and eczema, you will start, your body's, imagine it's sort of trying to whisper to you, and we struggle to listen quite often. It starts to kind of shout a little louder. And then burnout is phase 4. So I think of this as like high functioning burnout, when you're starting to hit those 3 symptoms that I told in the syndrome that I talked about earlier on. but we might still be able to push through and think that we're still functioning. But maybe other people are kind of noticing that we're dropping a few balls, or we're just not feeling good, but we've not paused yet to kind of go, what's going on here really? I'll rest next week after this next thing, next time. And then phase 5 is that kind of chronic burnout where your body just forces the stop. It kind of pulls the stop cord and just says no. And that's when I've had people who've reported to me in therapy, they've just been unable to get out of bed one morning. I've had a couple of people who said they couldn't talk, which is quite alarming to not be able to talk. But it makes sense because it's one of those thinking brain capacities, that ability to choose your words eloquently, to think of what you want to say. So comprehension and eloquence like goes, panic attacks, scary cardiac symptoms, or if you're prone to any physical health problems, quite often that can be the way the body forces the stop, is physically, because the body and brain are one. We tend to think of physical health as being something different to stress, but it's not. It's all part of the same thing. What else have I seen? Yeah, I think I'm probably scared people enough, but the body will stop you.
And you have, the thing is, as she's explaining this, we're not just talking about work. She has other, she talks about caregiver burnout. In her book, she lists several different types of situations in life where you can get burnout. It's not just work. And also some clinical stories you list in there too. One that has stood out to me just because I did it too was the dad driving in the car, and the kid was in the car and he just kept zoning out. And that was me this last year. I would just zone out. The kids were talking to me and I would just zone out in the car, and they'd be like, "Mom, Mom." And I'm like, "Oh, shoot." Or this one, I was at work and someone was talking to me and I zoned out, and I just didn't even, and am not currently, just because of everything going on now, having a baby and stuff, but I was a keynote speaker, and it got to the point where I couldn't find my words. I couldn't, there was one time I was speaking, and on the stage, I literally could not think of what I was trying to say. And I just thought, oh no. And so I relate to so much to that stage 5, but I also want people to know, for time, obviously we can't hit everything in the book, but if you're looking for different stories to connect to and different points in life to connect to, such as caregiver, it is in the book. So, so with the 5 stages of burnout, we just kind of went over that. What is the difference? Because there's green mode, amber mode, and red mode. So we have the 5 stages.
Yeah.
But then we have green mode, red mode, or green mode, amber mode, and red mode. What can you give us a summary of those?
Yeah, so we've started to talk about that when we started talking about the autonomic nervous system, which was green mode is your part of your autonomic nervous system that you would like to be in most of the time, ideally, because as green suggests, it's kind of green for go. We can operate nicely because our brain's thinking clearly. We feel safe, essentially. This is the ventral vagal part of the nervous system for anyone who likes the technical terms. When we're thinking like that, our prefrontal lobes are online, which means we can access our language centers. We can problem solve. We can have creative thought, abstract thought of things that aren't in front of us right now. It's our human thinking clever brain, and that's where most of our work tends to operate from, doesn't it? We need access to that, but also we can interpret facial expressions and body language more accurately. So we're sitting and nodding and smiling, and that feels good to us, so we feel safe with each other, and so I'm able to interpret and listen and respond, hopefully eloquently enough. So that's also the business as usual for our body, where our digestive system is digesting nicely as it should, and our breathing is fairly regulated. And when we want to sleep at night, we need to be in green mode in order to switch off and go to sleep, because we need to feel safe enough to fall asleep. People often have a misconception they need to be really tired. It's not about being tired enough to fall asleep. It's about feeling safe enough to fall asleep. And that comes from, if you think about our ancestors, if they were out on the hunt, they couldn't just, oh, I'm really tired of running after this animal or running away from the predator. I'll have a little sleep here. We have the ability to delay rest until we get somewhere safe. So of course that's problematic for us now because threats are quite prominent, aren't they? We can have our phone quite often next to us. That's why I recommend one of the early interventions therapy, get an alarm clock set up if you're a carer, a way for people to call you on a landline, like the practical interventions around reducing threats that are incoming all the time, the pings and things. Anyway, so that's green mode. So amber mode, I once was told the Americans prefer orange to amber. Is that right?
I would say amber.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would say amber.
Okay, put a pin on that. In that. That's your sympathetic mode. So that's the place our nervous system goes to first when there's incoming stresses or demands. So everything ramps up a gear. So it's like you've had a little shot of the stress hormones, which can be okay in small amounts, like something called eustress. I don't remember. Do you remember that bell curve? You know, that pleasant feeling of like, I'm on it. I'm on top of this. I'm feeling good. I'm challenging myself. I'm getting through my list. So we don't want to demonize stress. But that body shift that's happening, all of the organs in your body have had a dose of that stress hormone to gear them up. And it's about mobilizing for that action, for the fight or flight. So yeah, we're engaged, we're motivated, and it feels clearer in our thinking for a short time. We're very focused on our problems and solving that. So thinking becomes quite distilled and kind of focused and targeted. If that keeps going though, that stops feeling like motivational and it starts to feel highly stressful, like I said, because it becomes very tunnel vision and narrow and rigid. And of course, if we begin to think there's no way out of this, that's where we tip into the red, the dorsal shutdown that I mentioned earlier, the last part of the nervous system your nervous system really wants to go to, because it is about the immobilization. Mobilization didn't work, so now I need to become immobile and withdraw, because like I said earlier, the predator, if you've ever seen any of the David Attenborough or whoever does your programs over their nature programs, when the predator is chasing the prey and the prey has no way of escaping, it would do its last ditch attempt for survival. It'll flop because flopping makes it look unappealing and unappetizing. So the thrill of the chase, the adrenaline and the sympathetic mode for the predator just kind of starts to drain away and it'll walk off. So it seems like a strange strategy to go immobile when we're in the thick of it, but actually it can be quite effective. What that looks like for humans, we might not flop, although we might do. I do think that's what happens in bad burnout, but it does mean that we're shut down, we're not absorbing information, and we are just on autopilot. We're kind of cognitively just not all there. And that's where you said, like, your kids in the car, like, Mom. And the examples in the book give, yes, some case examples of what that looks like for different types of work, like an entrepreneur, a teacher, an architect, all different types, because it's not always that obvious to us because we're so shut down. It's a bit of a catch-22. But
and
yeah, we don't want to.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you have those symptoms, or the symptoms that you talked about earlier, the physical symptoms, you do start to think like something is wrong with your health.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're going into like early dementia. I mean, that's like, with your speaking and your work, and you're like, and it makes you, which then makes the anxiety like so much worse because you're going to all these different scenarios that seem like the most obvious.
Sure.
And so you're looking for ways. And then also you had mentioned, you don't start recognizing things for really what they are, which makes me wonder if that's why people start to get more defensive. If they start to think people are more against them, if they're starting to read people wrong, because like you had said, what was it that you had said part of the brain starts to not be able to
Your frontal lobes?
Yes. Your frontal lobe is not able to work as well. And so maybe that's why, relationships start going south because you're not interpreting things correctly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think the more you talk and the more like, just the book, it's so fascinating how so much that you put in different categories wasn't actually in those categories.
If you've been putting off a cleanup because it sounds like a hassle, it doesn't have to be. With Little Green Dumpster Co., renting a dumpster is quick, affordable, and flexible. They're family-owned and proud to offer the most affordable dumpster rentals in the area without cutting corners on service. You pick the size, you set the timeline, they make it easy. Simple process, honest pricing, real customer care. Little Green Dumpster. Get started at littlegreendumpsterco.com.
If you're looking for the best place to get a great home-cooked meal, along with great service in the Branson and Kimberling City area, then look no further than Ma's Place Family Restaurant and Pit-Style Barbecue in Kimberling City. Ma's Place is known for their made-from-scratch meals. And don't forget about Bruce's Pit-Style Barbecue that is slow smoked so it will...
Mark, time's up!
Melt in your mouth. Ma's Place Family Restaurant and Pit-Style Barbecue in Kimberling City.
Hi, this is Dr. Linda Truitt from Ozark Veterinary Clinic in Ozark. We have been taking care of animals from a Yorkie, cows, cats, with a full-service clinic that offers complete surgical services, hospital, boarding, and now we take care of exotic animals from parakeets, snakes, to even flamingos. Ozark Veterinary has been taking care of pets and farm animals for over 50 years. Stop by our animal care center now, specializing in exotic animals on East Highway 14 in Ozark.
Something that's not in the book actually, but I've started to share when I do talks, is also in the relational part of it. This is in the book, we withdraw. We withdraw quite often because there's shame there as well, but also because we're trying to figure it out, like what's going on here. And because we are disconnected. So, you said you were talking to your kids and you're not absorbing what they're saying because your frontal lobes aren't online. So that all affects communication. But if you also think about the animal kingdom, if you've got any pets, what do they do when they have hurt themselves? They tend to hide, because the weak one of the pack is the one that will get picked off by the predator or left behind by the pack. And so quite often we have that urge in us too, to not let others see that we are vulnerable or weak, which is how we interpret it in that moment because we don't know what's going on. And so we will hide. And so one of the important things, which I'm sure you had a question on, but I'm going to drop it in at this point, even though you've not asked, but co-regulation, connection, human connection is one of the ways that we can start to feel safe again. The thing is, there's a chasm quite often between people at that point, because if you've done things, if you've been irritable and snappy and you've pushed people away and you've withdrawn, your partner or whoever lives in your house is probably not feeling that willing to go to you and go, hey, we just need to hug it out here. Right. I've had a conversation with my husband that we understand that sometimes we go into that place and it always feels like anger to the other person. So we know now if one of us is feeling like, I'm pretty sure I haven't done anything to annoy them. Like we will say, are you okay? Have I done something to annoy you? Or are you? Because quite often we would have a few days. I feel embarrassed saying this because I'm a psychologist, but I am also a human, where we would like just rumble along, both of us needing a hug and both of us feeling like we couldn't cross that chasm. So, even if it just starts with a hand on the shoulder or like some sort of connection, oxytocin is released when we have connection. And oxytocin is a bit of an antidote to the stress hormones, which is why we need to seek it out. And those are the kind of increasing our cues of safety. So our nervous system can let go of its sympathetic or dorsal shutdown response and come back into green.
Yeah. I often tell my family this emotion or attitude or whatever, this is not about you. This is not about you. This is me dealing with something that I am trying to work through right now. And it often comes out, those words often come out kinder to my kids saying that. My husband, it usually is a little less patient, like, stop taking this personally. This isn't about you. Like, come on now. Like the kids are learning, you're old enough to know better. But at the same time, that's not true. Like I really need to start going in a kinder way, saying the same way I do to the kids, like, this isn't about you, because just because he's 38 like me doesn't mean he needs to know. He's not a mind reader. So for me, it's finding the balance of communicating what's going on kinder to my spouse.
Well, maybe you need to start with you, like just you need some phrases that are for you to begin with. So you can kind of So these are embodied affirmations, because I talked about affirmations earlier. Is that a word that you're familiar with,
Yes.
where you have some words, but the
Absolutely.
embodied bit is trying to connect with the body, because we know that 80% of the messages go upwards. So if you've got the kind of wording, so I don't know exactly what it would be for this, but it might be like, I'm in a difficult place and I feel like pushing everyone away, or my husband is feeling my emotions as anger right now. It's not his fault, but I'm going to talk to him, and I've got words that I can use. I don't know if there's anything here that you might want to use, but you might want to write it down. You might want to record it as a voice note. I do that quite often with my clients. I get them to record either myself as their therapist. I'm a compassionate, warm kind of person in their life. So they like to hear little voice notes from me, which we kind of prepare in session on. They record on their phone, or you could record it for yourself, or you could get your husband to record one when you're calm. When you're both calm, you're in a good place. Like, say, actually, last time I could have done with hearing these words, and before I could reach across that chasm, I might have just been able to press play on a voice note.
That's such a good idea. That is such a good idea. I think, and I love anything that I can add to my toolbox.
What's in your toolbox?
Do it.
Do you have anything in your toolbox? What's in there right now?
So what I typically do right now, my toolbox is like, right now my toolbox is a little burnt out itself. Just the ability to tap into it is like tapping into it when it's too late. But that's just, again, trying to work through things to where I'm getting more ahead. But I'm really big on writing things down instead of saying it out loud, because when I say it out loud, it comes with all the stress emotion. So I like to write it down, and I'll text my husband. That way I have time to say, I'll text it and I'll say, that probably sounds harsh, and I'm able to delete and rewrite. Whereas if I'm saying it out loud, I can't delete and rewrite. So if I'm really at a place where I'm really just like stressed and tired and not coping well, I'll start explaining how I feel through text, even if he's sitting right next to me. But it works because he doesn't get the emotion, and we don't fight afterwards. And then once we kind of work through that, then we're talking again. Another thing, I go and I walk, the treadmill, and just walk the treadmill, get some of that out.
Can I say something about nervous system? What's happening on these, like the tools that are working and why they're working?
Yeah.
So the treadmill and movement is one of the techniques, not necessarily a treadmill, but any kind of physical movement when you're in that sympathetic mode, is a way of dispelling and discharging the excess. Because it's about a mobilization for safety, we often have excess stress hormones and energy. So if you can burn through it until you're pleasantly tired, then you can move back into green more easily. And if you're in a shutdown place, then you might need to do more gentle exercising. That's maybe when you just plod on the treadmill. But that's just about gentle moving and mobilizing again.
Yeah. And again, I'm not perfect at it. When I'm in green mode, I'm telling you, I have like all the tools in the toolbox. It all comes. But when I'm not, things do not come to me as easy. And so working through that. But anyway, but that's why we have books like Trauma of Burnout that help us work through that. So, but why, so a lot of the things that you've mentioned, and one thing I want to hit on, a lot of the things that you've mentioned also coincide with symptoms of ADHD. And so I want to ask you personally, I am ADHD. I know several people who are. And so how do you recognize the difference between it being ADHD and burnout, or burnout and ADHD just all in one?
Well, ADHD there would have been signs of that for a long time. So, tracing back and thinking like, are these new difficulties? Are they context specific to these new stresses that have come into my life or not? But yeah, the overlap or the why it's important for us to be thinking about ADHD and burnout is that you're at higher risk, because those executive functioning skills, problem solving and organizing and planning. You might need extra support to do, like physical, practical support and time, body doubling on all of this in order to stay on top of things. So if we don't have that all set up for us in a supportive way where we're working or at home, and unfortunately quite often we don't, because that's not how the world has been unfortunately set up, then that puts an extra stressor and strain, same with like other forms of neurodivergence, like dyslexia and autism. These are all forms of neurodivergence that are stressful because we're not got the tools well set up. The second thing is alexithymia, which is tuning into the body's needs. So that can be more difficult as well. So, noticing that you're tired, noticing that you're needing the toilet or you're hungry. Like lots of people will say they will just keep going because task switching is also hard. And you said already that's difficult because when you're, a lot of motivation comes from that kind of interest-based, quite often for a lot of people with ADHD. So if you're really interested in something and you're just pursuing, it's really hard to then switch task. You're nodding so much to what I'm saying.
Yes, because it's so hard to, because it's so true. I think for people with ADHD, the burnout cycle is so real because the impulsivity, it's, oh, here's an idea, let's do it. Oh, here's an idea, let's stack it on top of this. Oh, I can do that too. And you think you're invisible to anything and you can just do because you have the internal energy of, let me say this. In the last 2 years, on top of everything. So I ran for school board. So I ran a campaign, had a full-time job, had the podcast. I was mom. We opened a coffee business. I mean, we just stacked. But here's why. Because in my mind, I go, oh, I'm overloaded. I need to rest. So then I rest for like a week. And after that week, my system is re-energized. And I say that, but it's actually not. I think it's a false re-energized.
Yeah.
And so then after that week, I'm like, oh, I'm good. We can add something. We can go back. I have an idea. Let's do this idea. Let's run on it,
Yeah.
And what I think really is happening is it's a false sense of rest. My body really did not rest. My brain did not really rest. But the way it's wired, I thought I was in rest. And so I did this cycle of burnout. And so I think that's what put me in that stage 5 of burnout, is this false sense of, oh, I'm good, just a couple days, let's add more. And so we've unloaded all that. We sold the coffee business, and really the only thing I do now is I'm mom, wife, and then I have the podcast, and that's it. And it's very imperative that everybody, I'm 7 months pregnant and out of breath. So if you hear me breathing heavy, it's only because I'm 7 months pregnant.
Okay, I thought you were getting emotional. So
no, I only have so much wind. But anyway, and so I think that's where that burnout, that repetitive burnout for people with ADHD comes. And then we hit stage 5. And in stage 5, we don't realize it's burnout. We're thinking, we're losing our mind. We're thinking, okay, do I have like pre-dementia? Like what? And it's so, and as somebody, ADHD, anxiety is very real in ADHD. And so I just think for the neurodivergent space, it's a terrible cycle.
I'm curious though, because you've made a massive change. How have you managed to stick to that commitment?
A lot of, it can get hard because I like to be very active and I'm an idea person. And so it's very, very hard. But I think the thing is, it's just getting to that stage 5 and not even having the capacity to care. And I don't want to be there.
So the change happened after you'd hit full on stage 5 burnout, that you were able to stay committed to your commitment to reduce the amount. Yeah, that you do see that a lot, and we talk about that in the book as post-burnout growth.
I don't see it as necessarily, I look at it as, okay, this is my time. And also as somebody who's like, um, I like to be active. I like to be engaged. That's hard. It's hard mentally a little bit, but I had to force myself these last few months. It also helps to be pregnant because I don't have the physical energy at the
True.
moment, but I really had to force myself. And I would tell myself, I would say, like, whenever I start to get, sad about it or like frustrated, like I'm not doing anything, I'm not productive. Like, what is this? I would have to, because I was comparing myself to the busyness. And I would have to tell myself, and I still tell myself, your body and brain need this. Your body and brain need this. This is not a failure. This is not you turning into somebody who has no goal or, your body and brain need this. And what you're doing right now by sitting here and doing nothing is allowing your body and brain to heal. And so it changes my mindset to, woe is me. I can't believe I'm not doing anything. Who am I? To,
Right. Yeah.
I'm somebody who's taking care of myself and my body needs it. And giving myself that, that confidence boost of, you are doing something. You just don't see it on the outside. And so that's really been a game changer for me and allowed me to sit still.
What's been your experience of doing the podcast with less balls being juggled? I'm just curious if there's a quality that's different for you.
Yeah, I actually look forward to the podcast now. Whereas before I was like, oh, I have to get these episodes in. But it was the same thing with keynote speaking. Because I was also a speaker on top of it. And before, and this is why I stopped, because I personally feel like if I'm speaking to people and I am motivating people, it needs to come from a place of health. Because even if I'm saying all the right things, but internally I'm just like, I can't even use these things right now. I'm a big believer that, roots grow out in what you speak and what you do and how it influences people. I believe it really, eventually those roots are going to pour into people. And I don't want unhealthy roots pouring into people. So that's why I stopped speaking, because I thought, this is not the time. I am no longer speaking. And people probably thought I was effectively speaking, but I knew internally it wasn't there. And so then I stopped doing that. And because it got to the place where it was like, now I have to prepare for speaking, and it wasn't, and I don't want to do, I want everything to be genuine. And if I'm not at a place where I can be genuine, I have no business doing it, is my personal philosophy. And I don't think taking a break from it is a bad thing, to allow myself to get to a place where it's genuine again. And so, like with the podcast, I do look more forward to doing the episodes and getting content on. It doesn't seem like a burden anymore. And
you can tell
it's a new normal. Yeah, it's a new normal. I'm learning the new normal. I'm not saying that I have this down pat. I'm not saying that telling myself your body's healing is down pat. I want every listener to know that I am still working through getting confident in this new normal, but I'm working to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to emphasize, and I can see there are benefits.
Yes.
And yeah, just as an experience, I've been on a few podcasts, but I can tell you're really into it because you've really genuinely read the book and prepared in advance. And this is a really great conversation. I'm really enjoying it. And I know anyone listening will be really finding it helpful because you're being so authentic.
Yeah.
And that's not always the experience of podcasts. Sometimes it all feels a little bit like tokenistic.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to feed that back.
Thank you.
It's great.
But yeah, that's where it is. And that's why I was interested in ADHD, because ADHD just on its own feels like burnout. I just think so, just living with it my whole life. But then when you have the burnout involved, it's like the symptoms are just through the roof and you start. So anyway, so I wanted to at least add that in there for all the neurodivergent people in the community. So, again, just so everybody knows for time, we're going to skip down to the things that you can do starting today to help start igniting that healing process. But please, please, please get this book because there is so much that we have not discussed that is invaluable. And it's going to put so many words to what you are experiencing, and just that alone feels healing. So, Claire, what are some of the things that people can do to start igniting? Again, all of these are going to be in the book, but we'll go over just a couple.
Never know where to start with this question because I want to just give everybody all the stuff.
Yeah.
But chapter 5 basically does that bringing together of all of that information that we've gone through of the autonomic nervous system and the practical tools that you could be using to basically navigate up and down the colors, the going from amber to green or going from red to green. So we started to talk about some earlier, where using physical movement when you're feeling agitated or irritable. I recommend having some sort of routine at the end of the day, particularly if you work from home where you haven't got a proper transition between home and work, where you try and put all the cues of work, because remember those are cues for your nervous system of danger, of threat, which I know sounds intense, but essentially it is. Because if you have a routine, it's like sending a message to your brain and body, and I'm safe to switch off now. Like we do with our kids at night, where we have a bedtime routine which makes them feel safe enough to go to sleep, like a glass of milk, a warm bath, a book, a lullaby, that kind of thing. But obviously, we're not going to start doing that for ourselves, but it might involve, if you've got a desk and you're at home, putting your computer away or throwing a blanket over it if you can't manage to properly put it away, changing your clothes, having a shower, having different clothes for after work, having a different mug for your tea for after work, and then trying to use some sort of movement. And if you can't get out and do a jog or you don't have a running machine, I sometimes clean. I know that always sounds a bit like a strange burnout advice from an expert, but I like cleaning because it feels like I'm in doing mode, but I'm not generating more for my to-do list. Whereas if I carry on emailing, I'm usually just generating more returns of emails, and then I get sucked in again. And I'm not really moving my body. I'm not closing off my brain from work. So I go and scrub between the grouting, or I in the bathroom, or I hoover, or do some windows, get the smears off. So it feels satisfying, but I'm kind of just letting it all out a little bit. Chopping potatoes, peeling the carrots, all of that is good. Yeah. So trying to do a little bit of that. Transitioning between tasks, I've already mentioned. I think that's a difficult point for people, but it can also be a time when you deliberately take an action to check in with yourself. So like we're going to transition out of this conversation in a minute, which means we'll be about to start something else. So I don't know what you're going to do, but I've got to go and get my kids from school. Quite often I'll then have another meeting. So trying to think, okay, I might only have a few minutes, but what am I feeling in my body? So like right now, obviously we've both been talking a little fast and excitedly. I'm getting a bit of like not unpleasant tension, but I can feel I've been sat still and I kind of got a bit of energy there. So I might just want to stretch, just listen to your body, and that feels so good. I'm just stretching now, actually. Do you want to join me? Feels so good.
I will join you.
Yeah, good. We're moving our arms up and
Yes.
down and just kind of feeling into the body. Or a few slow breaths, or like I said, quite often I really love embodied affirmations. So on a Tuesday, I have my trauma clinic and I see about 5 clients who often have quite heavy things going on for them. That can pull me down, not into necessarily a stuck place in terms of my dorsal nervous system, but I might dip into that. And I know I can come back out of it. When I come home, I often have a cuddle with my guinea pigs, and that helps me. Pets are really lovely for kind of regulation. But in between clients, obviously, I don't have a spare guinea pig at work. So I might just put my hands on my heart and just say, I'm doing my best. This is difficult work, but I'm doing my best. And I can be here for myself. I often make a cup of coffee and I put it in a heat-proof mug and I take a few sips of that so it'll last me the day. So it's like little bits of self-care at the transition points of your day so that you don't get to bedtime without having tuned into your body at all. So those are all kind of like in the moment techniques, but obviously we also need to think about what the tennis ball machines are that are shooting balls at you. That's a whole different conversation, which we're running out of time for. But I often think like trying to work out what they are, map out your stressors, have a conversation with someone else, because often we minimize how much stress we're under. I have that so many times. People don't they're like dismissive, like, well, that's just being a mum, or that's just like what the job entails. But that might still be a lot. And also we might also then be blinding ourselves to potential sources of support, like maybe buddying up, like I pick up your kids on this day, you pick up mine, like that's one day where I don't have to do the school run. There might be conversations like that are possible.
That's perfect. I thank you. And thank you for joining us and taking the time to join us. And I cannot stress enough, this book, I know for sure, if you're in the Ozarks area, I know for sure is available in all the libraries because I checked.
Oh, great.
And yes, and also you guys can purchase it online. I highly suggest it. I highly suggest deep diving into it. I mean, there's so much information. It is called The Trauma of Burnout. She also has Burnout. Trauma of Burnout is what I read. And
the other book is the British version. It's the same content though. So
okay.
If you're based in the US, it's the Trauma of Burnout. If you're based in the UK, it's Burnout, How to Manage Your Nervous System Before It Manages You. But it's also available as an audiobook, because I'm sure if people are listening to you as a podcast, they probably like consuming books as a podcast, audio version. So yeah, go check out Spotify and Audible.
Awesome. Claire, thank you so much for coming on.
I've loved this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.